In 2012, it occurred in Guangdong, China. I was in my second year at that time. I didn't want to work part-time during my summer vacation, so I returned to my hometown. It was past 8 o'clock in the evening when I returned to the village in our small southern villages. The streets were usually less crowded than during the day, but that day there was no one. I was walking down the alley when I noticed a strange phenomenon. For a few days now, I'd noticed a circle of scattered paper dust in front of every house's door. These doors were closed, and this paper charm was probably to ward off the evil spirits. That was when I realized why there was no one on the street tonight. Someone had died in the village. Even though I didn't believe in superstitious things, I definitely still felt the hair on the back of my neck. So I didn't dare to stay in the street and dashed home shouting, "Dad! Mom! I'm back!" I exclaimed loudly. I went to school in Shanghai at the time, which was not far from home, but there was only one break per semester. So when they heard my voice, my parents greeted me cheerfully, and I noticed that my mother's face was very happy, while my father seemed a little concerned. My father approached me and pushed me into the house, refusing to let me speak. When I saw my father's worried expression, I felt strange. When my father pushed me into the house, he quickly shut the door and looked at me, terrified, as if there was something dangerous inside. When my mother noticed me asking, she explained why. It was discovered that there was a deceased person in the village and the death seemed strange. It was amusing to hear that my hometown was still superstitious about these things in this day and age. "Mom, we can't meddle in other people's domestic affairs, so don't believe these rumors," I explained. My father was irritated when he heard me say this because I didn't believe it. Then he came over and told me about Mrs. Lan's death. Miss Lan went to town a few days ago to buy food when a small truck behind her lost control and rushed towards her. Miss Lan was crushed by the wheel without having time to react. The entire car was smashed to the front. She died on the spot, and the scene was described as tragic. The most terrifying thing was not this, but Miss Lan's body, which could not close her eyes or close her mouth as if she was resentful. After that, when Miss Lan's family asked the monk to keep an eye on her, the monk stated that Miss Lan had died unexpectedly before the end of her life. As a result, Miss Lan's family sought someone to carry the coffin in accordance with the old custom. They carried the coffin for several days and nights and were still hanging around, which made my father very nervous and made him warn me not to go out at night. I agreed, but I didn't give it much thought at the time. My father truly understood me. He knew I always did my own thing and held at me. My mother was nagging next to me, and hearing her nags irritated me. So I told them I was tired and went to bed early so I wouldn't have to argue any longer. But that night, I had a strange dream, or rather, a nightmare. I had a dream that I was wandering through the village streets and alleys like a maze that I couldn't get out of. I ran into some friends on the street and went for a walk. Actually, even though we didn't get the full experience of a big city there, the beautiful scenery here was really nice. Especially the hill behind the village, because in recent years, people have paid a lot of attention to the ecological environment. The fresh air and the overlapping mountains was a good place. We kept playing like crazy until after 9 o'clock at night, when we split up and went to our respective houses. When I got home and saw that no one else was there, I remembered that my father had told me about Miss Lan's family carrying the coffin, but I didn't believe it and I was not afraid. However, as I entered the alley on the west side of the village, I was startled to hear a strange sound from behind. When I turned around, I saw 4 strange-dressed men approaching me, carrying a large coffin. They were all dressed in gray cloth with red ribbons. Only then did I realize I had encountered the coffin-carrying individuals sought by the Tran family. These people would greet everyone they met, but it was said that if the person responded, the pain of the deceased would be transferred to that person. They had most likely been carrying for a few nights and haven't been able to talk to anyone. They took charge as soon as they saw me. They greeted me enthusiastically, but I had lived here since I was a child, and I know the rule: don't answer or say anything. But that person's words continued to irritate me. My throat and eyes were itchy and I really wanted to respond. Also, my mind appeared to be in control at the time, and the answer was about to be said. At this point, a young man rushed from behind, holding an SLR camera, photographing people carrying coffins. I recognized the young man as a visitor from somewhere else, not knowing how he ended up in our village. He was extremely inquisitive about everything. The man was unaware of the carrying coffin rule, so he approached the people carrying the coffin. The coffin carriers rejoiced when they saw this person take the initiative to speak. I believed the young man was my age, and I was concerned that he would do something bad. But before I could say anything, I noticed 4 people carrying coffins turned their heads to look at me sullenly, as if they were afraid I would ruin the plan. Those people's stares gave me chills. I was terrified. I knew people who accepted this type of carrying coffin were bad people. I was shocked, so I kept my mouth shut. To avoid trouble, I could only turn my head and walk towards the house. The young man continued to inquire. Those who carry the coffin appeared to deliberately turn the coffin's head towards the young man while answering. That night I ran home, but my father scolded me so harshly that I didn't dare to tell him about what had happened that night, so I went to bed. When I woke up on Monday morning, my mind was dizzy and a little sore. I was not sure if it had anything to do with what happened the night before. I staggered out of my room to find my parents eating breakfast and discussing a car accident. I moved forward immediately and listened to my father's words. But after hearing it, I got a chill down my spine and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The dead man turned out to be the young man who came to our village last night with an SLR camera. He stayed in a small hotel in our village last night, but he only checked out and walked out in the morning. A large garbage truck passed him and then lost control. The garbage truck sped up and slammed into the young man. He died on the spot, under the wheel, without having the time to react. I felt a pang of fear and guilt as soon as I heard the news. If I had stopped him last night, he wouldn't have died. But if he hadn't died, I would have replaced him. What about me? There were no solutions to these problems, but there was a legend here, and those who answered the coffin driver will have a few years of bad luck. And in the worst case, death.
Another strange story about Dr. Chan, a talented and virtuous rural physician. Dr. Chan often traveled from village to village to examine and treat people regardless of day or night. He was highly respected by everyone in the area. That time, Dr. Chan visited a farmer's family in a neighboring village. After checking the pulse and prescribing medicine, the family was deeply grateful and saw him off at the door. The doctor respectfully folded his hands in farewell. Thanks to his skills in traditional pulse checking and acupuncture, combined with some inherited remedies, Dr. Chan had saved many lives. That day, after finishing treating an elderly woman, it was already past 9 at night, so he had to travel home in the dark. Illness can strike at any time, regardless of day or night. As long as someone called for help, Dr. Chan never refused, so waking early and returning late became routine for him. The distance to that farmer's house wasn't short, more than 10 kilometers, and once he left the village, it was all deserted fields with barely any homes around. Dr. Chan was known for his righteous aura and never feared anything wherever he went. He used to say that evil could never defeat righteousness. But that night, on his way home, he truly encountered something strange. As he walked, Dr. Chan vaguely heard soft footsteps behind him, sometimes near, sometimes far, seemingly following him. At first, he suspected a thief taking advantage of the dark to rob him, so he stayed alert. But he didn't stop walking, just glanced back subtly. To his surprise, there was nothing behind him except some old, desolate graves. He found it odd. His hearing had always been sharp. He couldn't have been mistaken. Yet, no matter how carefully he looked, no one seemed to be following. At that moment, another possibility crossed his mind. He was in a deserted place. If what was following him wasn't human, then... Thinking this, Dr. Chan became tense. He glanced back at the dark, empty fields, unsure what was lurking there, and instinctively quickened his pace. But no matter how fast he walked, the quiet footsteps still followed him, not too close yet not far behind. It wasn't until he reached the village entrance that he saw it clearly, a faint shadow trailing him, humanoid in form. Upon arriving at his doorstep, he spat 3 times on the ground and stomped on the spits, saying it would prevent unclean spirits from entering the house. Dr. Chan stepped inside, bolted the door, and walked further in. He believed that even if the spits weren't enough to stop it, the guardian deity paintings on the doors would keep it out. But he was wrong. As he turned toward his room, he noticed something strange about the door. That thing, like mist or smoke, slipped right through the door, inching its way into the courtyard. Before long, the entire shadow had entered the yard, an eerie and terrifying sight. Dr. Chan thought to himself, this spirit is persistent, following me home. But he knew that such beings should be left alone if possible. So, he ignored it, washed up, and sat at his desk on the heated bed, resuming his prescription writing. His knowledge of traditional medicine was passed down from his father. Even though many now preferred Western medicine, he believed only Eastern medicine could truly cure ailments, so he was devoted to studying and preserving ancient remedies, analyzing the properties and theories of herbs in his spare time. The shadow stood outside the window, staring intently at Dr. Chan. But he paid it no mind. With such entities, ignoring them usually made them lose interest and leave. Reacting could lead to persistent haunting. Seeing that Dr. Chan kept ignoring it, buried in his writing, it puffed its cheeks in frustration outside the window. Then, it blew a cold gust of air from its mouth into the house. Strangely, the cold air passed right through the window frame, stirring the papers inside. The prescriptions he had just written were blown into the air, scattered everywhere. Dr. Chan figured maybe it had come to ask for help. Ignoring it wouldn't work anymore, so he called it in. You followed me all the way here, now you're causing trouble. Do you want me to help you with something? As it entered, Dr. Chan put down his brush and asked why it had been following and disturbing him. As they talked, he noticed it trembling, so he got up and retrieved some candles and offerings from the altar. He set up incense, candles, and some snacks as offerings, saying they were food for wandering spirits. The shadow began to gobble down the offerings as if it were truly eating them. Now speak. Why exactly are you looking for me? As it finished eating, Dr. Chan questioned its intent. It said it had tried contacting many people, but only Dr. Chan could sense its presence, so it hoped he could help. It began telling its story. Its name was Dao. After a failed harvest, it followed some fellow villagers to the city to work in construction. But when the job was done, the subcontractor fled with the money. Dao and others not only didn't get paid but were also beaten. The contractor even took Dao's ID while fleeing. With no job, no money, and unable to reach family, Tao had to scavenge for food. Eventually, unable to stay in the city, Tao decided to walk home. Along the way, a heavy rainstorm hit. Tao walked in the rain, no village ahead, no shelter behind, soaked to the bone. In the distance, he spotted a collapsed brick kiln in a field and decided to take shelter there. But upon getting closer, he saw the kiln was very old. Most of it had already crumbled. He hesitated. If it collapsed while he was inside, he'd die and become a wandering ghost. But staying outside in the cold rain after days without food would also be fatal. Looking at the rain with no sign of stopping, he gritted his teeth and left it to fate. He had to crawl in through the collapsed entrance to get inside. Exhausted and soaked, Tao leaned against the kiln wall and passed out. Days of wandering had drained him. The sleep this time was deep and heavy. He collapsed onto the cold, damp ground, his head resting on broken bricks, still sound asleep. No one knows how long he slept, but a loud noise suddenly jolted him awake. He jumped up and saw the kiln shaking violently, starting to collapse, bricks and dirt falling from above. The kiln was so old that part of the roof caved in, triggering the rest to fall. Tao realized if he didn't get out quickly, he'd be buried alive and truly become a ghost. He jumped up to run, but suddenly 4 hands reached from behind and grabbed him tightly. Everything happened too fast. He was terrified and couldn't react in time. He didn't know who was holding him, but he was sure he was alone in the kiln. He tried to reach forward to escape and look back to see who it was. What he saw nearly made him faint. 2 thin, shriveled ghosts were clinging to him. He struggled with all his might, but it was no use. The ghosts dragged him down. He tried to scream, but the collapsing noise drowned his cries. Bricks and dirt piled on top of him until he was completely buried. That rainy night, Tao died quietly in the old brick kiln. No one ever knew. After telling his story, Tao hung his head as if sobbing. He said he had roamed as a lonely ghost for 3 years, until Dr. Chan sensed him. Dr. Chan originally planned to use spiritual methods to drive the ghost away, but after hearing the story, he changed his mind. He promised to help find Tao's remains and contact his family. The ghost, grateful that its wish was fulfilled, thanked him repeatedly and left. True to his word, the very next day Dr. Chan gathered some strong men to search for the remains at the old kiln site Tao had mentioned. Though the kiln had collapsed beyond recognition, after some searching they found the spot. The workers dug diligently under his guidance. After a while, someone shouted, "Dr. Chan, we found it!" With Dr. Chan's help, it didn't take much effort to find something. He rushed over to check. Under the debris, they uncovered a skeleton, clearly years old, reduced to dry bones. Dr. Chan confirmed it was Tao's remains. He asked the workers to keep digging, and soon they found 2 more skeletons nearby. In total, 3 skeletons were found. Dr. Chan called the police. Thanks to his frequent cooperation with authorities, there were no issues. With the info he provided, the police located Tao's family. As for the other 2 remains, they led to another mysterious case. But that is another story. This strange story is told about a great landlord already past 40 years of age. He was famous throughout the region for his wealth and extravagant lifestyle. His life was one that many envied. Villagers often gossiped that it would be worth dying just to live one day like the landlord. In his house, gold and silver were piled up like mountains, too much to count. Each time he collected rent, he would indifferently order his servants to take it to the storehouse. Furthermore, he had many beautiful concubines. Every day he would immerse himself in wine and women, enjoying a life of luxury and debauchery. One day, while drinking wine with his wives in the flower garden, an unexpected event occurred, marking the beginning of a series of tragedies to come. At his feet, an old hedgehog suddenly appeared, causing one of the young concubines to scream in fright. The landlord quickly reassured her, telling her not to be afraid. He recounted that this hedgehog had been in the garden for many years. He had seen it since he was a child. Perhaps its age was even greater than his own. This old hedgehog seemed to have no fear of humans. It calmly picked up pieces of meat and licked the wine that the master had thrown on the ground, appearing extremely familiar. One night, after he had fallen fast asleep, a dark shadow silently entered the room, beginning to execute a demonic plan. Something climbed onto his body. The old hedgehog approached his face. From its mouth, a stream of white mist slowly wafted into the landlord's nose. Suddenly, he bolted upright, screaming in agony. His wife beside him startled awake, frantically asking what was wrong with the master. He clutched his head, screaming tragically. A severe headache tormented him, making it unbearable. His face contorted in pain. Despite inviting all the renowned physicians, both prominent and obscure, from the region to treat him, no one could find the cause of this strange illness. After 3 days and 3 nights of screaming in pain, the landlord finally breathed his last, leaving behind a colossal fortune and his concubines. While one of the concubines was keeping vigil by his coffin, a horrifying event occurred, terrifying her immensely. She heard a dry cough, coo, coo, coming from within the coffin. The sound emanating from the sealed coffin terrified her greatly. Immediately after, the landlord unexpectedly sat up from within the coffin. The concubine, terrified, fell to the ground, stammering, Master." His appearance had completely changed, no longer like before. His eyes became crazed, his smile hideous, and he drooled. The landlord, after coming back to life, had completely changed his temperament. He became lewd and brutal, treating his wives with extreme cruelty. Every day, he devised bizarre tortures to torment his wives. They could only weep and beg in vain. Not only that, but he also ate voraciously. Before long, his body became obese with a potbelly, yet his hunger seemed never-ending. Leftover food, he would stuff into his wives' mouths, forcing them to eat it all. This act showed his extreme brutality. The wives who had once loved and been faithful to him now only felt extreme fear and hatred. Unable to endure the torment any longer, they conspired together in an incredibly wicked plan to escape the clutches of the demon in their husband's guise. They prepared a lavish banquet, filled with all the delicacies he favored, but hidden within was a deadly trap. They feigned cheerfulness, coaxing him to eat a pill wrapped in food, saying it was a tonic to make him stronger. Immediately after eating, the poison began to take effect. He suddenly felt excruciating pain, his face contorted, knowing he had been poisoned. He writhed on the ground in agony for about half the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, then stopped breathing. The wives' plan had succeeded. But when they approached, a strange sight occurred. His obese body suddenly deflated and vanished. When they pulled back the outer layer of clothing, they were horrified to discover that inside was not his body but the carcass of an old white-furred hedgehog. This horror story takes place between two families, the Li family and the Wang family. Each family had a son and a daughter, so they arranged a betrothal. The daughter of the Wang family was sent to the Li family as a daughter-in-law from a young age. While living with the Li family, the Wang family's daughter was forced to do all the household chores. One day, she accidentally broke a stack of plates, and her mother-in-law immediately scolded her. The woman beat the girl with a stick and berated her harshly, calling her useless and incapable of doing anything right. That night, the girl fled back to her home, heartbroken, and tearfully told her parents about the suffering she endured in the Li household, especially the cruelty of her mother-in-law. Mr. and Mrs. Wang were devastated to see their daughter in such pain. Mrs. Wang held her daughter tightly, sobbing and cursing the Li woman for being so heartless. The next day, the Li family came to take their daughter-in-law back. Mr. Wang pleaded with them, saying the girl was still young, barely capable of much work, yet eating as much as an adult. He suggested letting her stay home until she officially married. The Li family agreed to let her remain temporarily. The girl stayed with her family, behaving obediently and sensibly. She diligently helped her parents with all the household chores. As time passed, the girl grew into a beautiful young woman at the age of 17. It was time to fulfill the betrothal and marry into the Li family. As her wedding day approached, she sat beside her mother, sobbing. Mrs. Wang pitied her daughter, knowing she didn't want to marry, but the betrothal had been arranged long ago, and she saw no way to break it. With tears in her eyes, the girl declared she would rather die than get married. Her mother had an idea. If the girl became a boy, she wouldn't have to marry at all. The mother and daughter decided to pray to the gods. Every day, the mother clasped her hands in prayer, begging the deities to transform her daughter into a boy so she could escape this cruel fate. After a long period of sincere prayers, their plea was finally heard. That night, as the girl slept, an old man with a white beard appeared. He said he had passed by and, seeing her sincerity, wanted to help. He handed her a magical pill and said that if she truly wished to become a boy, she should swallow it. But she could never go back. The girl immediately stretched out her hands to receive it. Without hesitation, she put the pill in her mouth and swallowed it. Instantly, her body began to change. Hair grew thick on her skin, an Adam's apple emerged, and her hands became large and rough. She couldn't believe it and checked beneath her clothes. She had indeed become a man. Overjoyed, he ran to tell his mother the good news. Unable to contain his excitement, he exclaimed that he had truly become a boy. Mr. and Mrs. Wang were both shocked and delighted. Their family now had another son, and, more importantly, they no longer had to fulfill the marriage agreement. On the wedding day, the groom's family arrived to take the bride, only to be told there was no daughter left to marry. Mr. Li was furious, accusing the Wang family of making up excuses to break the engagement instead of being honest. Mr. Wang brought out his child and confirmed to everyone that his daughter had truly transformed into a man. The Li family refused to believe that a girl could turn into a boy. The two families argued incessantly and decided to take the matter to the court for a ruling. After an investigation, the judge confirmed that Mr. Wang's daughter had indeed become a man. He ruled that the Wang family must return the betrothal gifts and that the engagement was nullified. With the matter settled, everyone returned home. The Li family lost a daughter-in-law, while the Wang family gained another son.
I was told this very scary story which took place 20 years ago by a nurse who also happened to be one of my colleagues. Back when she was young, she volunteered for the local medical team and had encounters with many spooky things. Since I didn't have much work to do on that day, I told her to recount the story. Back in the days, besides doctors, there were also Taoists who claimed that they could cure people. One of the female nurses said that it was just superstition as it sounded too good to be true for a Taoist to cure someone. I then told her that there were mysterious things happening long ago yet hadn't been scientifically explained yet. We started listening to the woman's story. That year, her medical team was sent to a mountainous area for conducting a survey, as a medical center was soon to be opened there. The village head was a man named Shin. He told the team to stay at the infirmary as he would assist them if they needed any help. The team leader asked Mr. Shin where he kept the herbs, then assigned the tasks to his teammates. Suddenly, there were noises of people arguing outside. Everyone curiously went out to check. Turned out that the wife of the village chief was having a quarrel with another woman who desperately appealed for her husband to be freed. Seeing the doctors, the woman instantly rushed to them. She went to the leader of the group, knelt down and cried terribly. The woman then begged them to save her husband from death. The village chief and his wife quickly rushed to stop the woman, saying she was being emotionally unstable. But the doctor requested the two to let go of her as she wanted to check on her husband's condition. Mr. Shin couldn't hide the anger on his face. He told the doctor that the man had been possessed and was under treatment, thus he shouldn't interfere in the process. Now the doctor was even more concerned as he heard the village had said something about possession. He insisted on seeing the sick man. As they were on their way to the place where the man was being treated, the woman introduced herself as Lan, while Zon was her husband, then recounted the story to the doctors. Her husband Zon and the village chief were close friends, as the term of office was about to expire. Shin had to cede the position for village chief to Zon. However, the head's wife was displeased as she didn't like her and Zon at all. That day, after Zon returned home from the jungle, the woman saw a red wound on her husband's forehead, yet Zon reassured her that it was just him clumsily tripping. However, Zon suddenly had a change in his personality as he constantly chased and hit other people without any reason. It was rumored that Zon had been possessed by a ghost, hence not being capable of becoming the next village chief. What was even scarier, the man acted more outrageously as he grabbed his head and screamed loudly, saying there were hundreds of insects wriggling in his head. Having no other choice, Lan had to tie her husband to his bed, leaving him shouting in pain. But one day the man untied the rope and rushed outside, which was completely unexpected to Lan. He aggressively attacked everyone he encountered. Later, the villagers had to tie him up and carry him to the house of the village chief. One Taoist said that Zon had been possessed, thus he needed to have the ghost removed at once. Zon was locked in a warehouse afterwards, looking miserable. Later, the man was being soaked in a big jar whilst having his body being tied firmly. Every day Lan went to take care of her husband, but the strange illness just tormented Zon as it had no sign of remission. Even on days when it was freezing cold and snow was falling outside, Zon was still trapped in the jar. Fearing that her husband would die if he continued to deal with this extreme situation, Lan begged the Taoist to release him, but the man immediately rejected it. Being furious, Lan rushed to her husband, intending to set him free, yet instantly got stopped by the villagers. The village chief's wife closed the door tightly, sarcastically told Lan that her husband was unworthy of governing the village, then kicked her out. Lan was heartbroken to recount the story. She neither believed her husband was possessed nor could be cured by that Taoist. As they finally arrived at the place, the scene appeared before their eyes freaked them out the moment they opened the door. Zon looked extremely fatigued. He was trembling from the freezing cold while his body was tied firmly. The water surface had also frozen. How could it be tolerable for a human being to endure all of this? The doctors quickly carried him out to the jar. Everyone was stunned. They wondered how the man was being treated in such a wrongfully strange way. The Taoist was also there. He looked worried, as if he was in fear of something. Meanwhile, the village's head's wife was saying something under her breath as she disdainfully gazed at the doctors. Zon was rushed to the hospital afterwards. His whole body was covered with sores. However, the man didn't make it as the sores became larger. He foamed at the mouth and died tragically. But the moment before he died, the man had held the chief's name and pointed his finger at him. Alan felt an immense pain in her heart as she witnessed the death of her husband. The female nurse had a suspicion that this incident had something to do with the village head and his wife. Lan returned home with great sadness while the villagers were still gossiping. They said Zon had done many bad things before, hence not being saved. Later that afternoon, the group of doctors had a discussion as the main doctor believed that the man had been killed by an abnormal parasite. The rest of the group was assigned to go out and inform the villagers that the man had died from a parasitic disease, not demonic possession. After telling the villagers to be cautious about the virus, the female nurse gazed at Lan's house. As she headed to the house, she saw two children running past her while yelling loudly. The female nurse kept walking. As she gazed inside, she saw Lan was comforting her son. Lan told her that her son was teased by some other kids. Thus, she chased them away. A while later at the riverbank, the two kids that the female nurse had previously encountered were found dead, drowning. What was more horrifying, there were sores appearing on the two corpses, which similarly happened to Zon. The villagers believed it was the ghost of Zon that sought revenge on them. One of the two children who died at the scene was that of the village chief. Hearing people say Lan had chased the two kids moments earlier, the wife became furious as she claimed it was Lan's fault that caused the death of her child. The wife aggressively rushed to Lan's house. She slammed the door, intending to hurt her. Unfortunately, as she kicked on the door, the roof tiles dropped from above and landed on her head. She screamed painfully as blood slowly dripped down. Lan and the female nurse were stunned to witness the scene. The nurse quickly checked on her, but it seemed like the severe injuries had made her lose consciousness. After the woman was taken to the infirmary, she suddenly acted crazy as soon as she awoke. The woman was tied to the bed right away. What terrified those present at the scene was the woman started having sores all over her body. The woman quickly got frightened as she didn't expect herself to endure this horrific disease. The female nurse quickly informed the village head on his wife's condition. The main doctor expressed his disappointment as he told Shin that his wife had been infected with a parasite that had killed Zon. Since the symptoms developed too quickly, there was just a slim chance for her to make it out alive. Shin refused to believe the doctor as he called some of the villagers to help him bring his wife to the Taoist, asking him to remove the ghost from her. The villagers quickly gathered in front of the Taoist's house. They seemingly didn't believe the doctors either. The main doctor told the nurse that he still hadn't figured out how the parasitic virus was transmitted, as some got infected by it while others didn't. All of a sudden, from inside the house, there were piercing screams which aroused the amazement of those who gathered outside. Shortly after that, they frantically ran away, which created absolute chaos. The female nurse rushed inside the house to check. The scary scene in front of her eyes instantly made her skin crawl. The village head's wife had died as she laid in a pool of blood with foam in her mouth and sores spreading on her body just like Zon. However, it was another thing that caused her death. Laying next to the woman was the Taoist. Turned out that Mr. Shin had beaten his wife to death with a bar, as he claimed the two had gone crazy and Zon was there to take revenge on them. Later that evening, Mr. Shin had ended up being killed the same way, as he foamed at the mouth while having sores and parasitic worms all over his body. Lun was in utter confusion as she couldn't figure out why she and her child weren't infected. According to the doctor, it was the wounds and injuries that allowed this parasitic virus to be transmitted. They only survived for a short period of time in natural environments, but could extend their lifespan if they stuck to open wounds. After the incident, a team of researchers on parasitic viruses was sent to the village. They quickly disinfected the whole area, and no one had contracted the strange disease ever since. After the female nurse finished her story, she still had no idea if there was actually a deadly virus in the village, or was it just the ghost of Zon that caused the horrific incident.
This story is about a man named Kim. As most of his childhood had been pampered by his parents, the man was very lazy. As time went by, it was until his mother became old and no longer had physical ability to work. Together with the scolding of his older siblings, the man decided to go out looking for a job. But Kim had no idea where he was heading to. He didn't even know what job would be suitable for him either. Luckily, he encountered a construction site on the way and assumed there would be a job for him. As Kim walked in the place, he met a worker with a cigarette in his mouth, looking bossy. Kim asked the man if he knew any job that was cushy enough for him to take. The man suggested him taking the job he was doing. He told Kim that he just needed to stay at the construction site, guarding it for a time period of 6 months. Kim agreed to take the job, and today was also his first day at work. After he was given the job, he followed the man to take a look around the site, then went to his row houses to stay. It was old row houses. Seemed like they had been built a long time ago, but strangely, as he arrived there, he saw nobody. There were just utter silence and pitch black darkness. But Kim didn't care much about it. As for him, having an easy job like this had already been an achievement to him, so the man didn't ask for anything else. After a long day of working, he felt exhausted, and it was weary to think of going out finding something to eat, so he chose to order food online. 15 minutes later, the food was delivered to him. Life being away from mom was amazing, the man thought to himself. He could sleep throughout the day, and with a phone that had access to Wi-Fi, he could order any kind of food he wanted to. After he finished his meal, he didn't even bother to clean up the mess as he left it there, and went outside to check the construction site. 20 minutes later, Kim returned to his shelter and went to bed. The man had fallen asleep as soon as he closed his eyes. But when it came to midnight, Kim suddenly had a feeling of heaviness all over his body. Even though he changed his sleeping position multiple times, he still found it uncomfortable to go back to sleep. He also felt cold and his body was drenched with sweat. At first, Kim tried to close his eyes tightly so he could get back to sleep, but failed to do it as he felt like there was someone behind him, while there was rustling to be heard. Feeling unable to put up with the bizarreness going on, Kim got up. He looked around, yet found no one in the room but him. Observing for a while, suddenly he stopped his gaze at the table. He didn't know why he did it, but he had a bad premonition. He tried to assure himself that there was nothing odd happening, it was just his imagination, and then went back to sleep. The next morning Kim woke up to tiredness as he didn't have a good sleep the night before. He got out of bed with his eyes barely open. But as Kim walked past the table next to his bed, he suddenly widened his eyes, mouth agape in amazement. Looked like he had seen something surprising. Turned out that what he saw was the empty food containers on the table. If he recalled correctly, they were leftovers from last night, but somehow they all disappeared. The chicken pieces and the bowl of soup had been eaten. The doors had been locked before he went to sleep, so there wouldn't be any chance that cats or dogs could break into the room, even the smaller ones. Kim was really curious about the mysterious disappearance of the leftovers, and for that reason he intended to bring more food with him and leave some leftovers for the night, as he wanted to find out who had eaten the food that night. This time he brought more food to the room, and only ate sparingly. The man was under the impression these leftovers would lure the ones who dared to steal his food that night. Kim intended to stay up all night to catch the culprits, but he was soundly asleep before the clock struck midnight. But just like the previous night, as soon as the clock said 12 o'clock, Kim once again had a feeling of heaviness all over his body, as if there was someone laying on him, which made him feel uncomfortable. The rustling together with the old gusts of wind awoke him. He again had a bad premonition, but this time he didn't quickly sit up. Instead, he slightly opened his eyes and turned his gaze onto the table. Kim took a deep breath to reassure himself, then slowly opened his eyes. His face suddenly changed color. Now it wasn't just the amazement he expressed when he found out about the incident this morning, but it was a terrifying expression on his face. There were flickering white shadows gathering around the table where he placed his food. Ghosts were standing around the table, picking up food with their bare hands and devouring it. The ghosts looked like they had been left starving for years. The white shadows with lifeless eyes had easily freaked out anyone. Despite panicking, Kim still came up with a way to chase the ghosts away, as he reached out to the switch and turned the lights on. Indeed, the ghosts disappeared as soon as he turned the lights on. Kim couldn't believe his eyes, or what he had just seen. To confirm what he'd been thinking was true, he plucked up his courage and walked to the table. Indeed, the food had disappeared. There were just empty plates left on it. Without a doubt, it was the ghosts that had eaten the leftovers, but this affirmation made Kim really scared. The man had a habit of leaving leftovers since he was a young kid, but this was his first time dealing with such a thing. Kim couldn't understand why this horrifying incident had happened to him. Was it him, or was this place haunted with voracious ghosts? But to reassure himself, Kim tried to come up with another answer for the problem he was dealing with, as he assumed he might have had hallucinations. Kim got back to his bed, tightly closed his eyes and waited for the sun to rise. The next morning, to clear his mind, Kim set out to town and went to a market. The noisy atmosphere at the market would help him forget about the fears he had last night. As Kim was walking around, he saw some fortune tellers. Recalling the incident last night, he approached them. A fortune teller looked at him and said, "Are there ghosts in your house? You look very anxious." Surprised by how quickly the man could find out about his problem, Kim told him everything about the bizarre incident and asked for his help. The man's face became darkened as he listened to the story. According to him, the construction site was once a mass grave, and most of them were left abandoned. The apartment building was built right on the mass grave. As a result, this place was often seen with starving ghosts at night, but they didn't harm anyone. However, Kim still asked the man to help him as he was scared. The fortune teller gave him a talisman, saying it would keep the ghosts away as long as it was placed at the front of the door. He even told Kim not to leave leftovers. Having received the talisman, Kim gave the man some money, then quickly left. With the talisman in his hand, Kim was bewildered, not knowing what to do. Even though he was scared of the ghosts, part of him still wanted to help them since they were pitiful and harmless to people. It took Kim a while to finally make a decision on whether to hang the talisman at the front of the door or not. If he did it, the ghost wouldn't be able to enter his room, but he didn't have the will to do it. Being hesitant for a while, Kim decided to throw the talisman away, as he believed the ghosts would never try to harm him. Since that day, somehow he was no longer bothered by the ghosts. Actually, he had placed a table outside the room and put some of his food onto it. The food was there for the pitiful ghosts to eat. From being a man with lazy, uncaring attitude, Kim had turned over a new leaf and became a better person.
At the end of last year, I had an offer of an internship at a famous private hospital in the city downtown. Working in the emergency department was under a lot of pressure. I also witnessed many sad and weird stories. One day, a group of doctors on duty was rushing to bring the corpse of an unfortunate patient to the morgue for the procedure. They quickly entered the hospital elevator. Reaching the top floor, which is also the hospital's morgue, the elevator door opened slowly and revealed a mysterious light ahead. They took the corpse out of the elevator, but couldn't stop feeling curious about the appearance of the strange light spot. But when they went along the hallway, it was as dark as usual. The light had disappeared, leaving only one room with the door open. One of them felt very strange because the place has never been visited except hospital staff. If doctors of the hospital were there, they wouldn't leave the door open like that. Although thinking for a while, the group of doctors could not answer their curiosity. Finally, they brought the body inside the morgue. When the door of the morgue was closed, in the middle of the corridor, an old man wearing a hospital uniform suddenly appeared. He staggered in the cold corridors. His eyes were white and his skin was pale. At the same time, the victim's body was also brought inside the room, which was filled with the smell of corpses. Two young doctors stood at both ends of the corpse, which was covered with a white cloth. They slowly brought it to the bed. But when they had just picked up the body, the two doctors were astonished to realize there was only one empty sheet on their hands. They put the sheet on the bed. Indeed, there was no corpse underneath it, which caused the doctors to be extremely worried and confused. After thinking for a while, the doctors concluded that the body maybe fell to the ground on the way there. They discussed and agreed to cover the bed with a white sheet. They pretended that the body had been successfully transferred to the morgue. Then they separated to find the body before dawn. In order to avoid being known by their superiors, the doctors quickly packed up and left the morgue. Three of them continued to push this bed out, walking slowly towards the hospital elevator. After that, they went in to try to find it, but the inside of the elevator was empty. There was no body. But when the door was just closed, the strange old patient appeared again in a mysterious and barbaric look. The only slipper under his foot seemed to be house slippers, but it didn't make any sound. He was walking and trembling. His steps were also very slow and short because his health seemed to be very weak. He walked with heavy steps because his whole body seemed to be uncontrolled. It swayed unsteadily. He went to the door of the stairs, pushing it with force. The sound of the door pulling echoed throughout the dark hospital corridor. He walked down step by step like a person who had just lost all his soul. He went towards the main hall of the hospital. At that time, the lights in the main hall had turned off. The whole space was very quiet. On the wall, the clock was already past 1 a.m. In the middle of the hall, the nurse on the duty that night was sitting to arrange a pile of papers and medical records to hand over to the next day's shift. The young nurse was very attentive. Her eyes did not leave the documents for a second. She worked hard to take notes and do calculations. In the distance, a dark shadow was walking heavy steps towards her without her noticing. When the black shadow was no longer far from her, the approaching footsteps also sounded more and more clear. She stopped her work and looked up. The man in front of her kept walking calmly. Looking at his appearance and outfit, she assumed that he must be an absent-minded elderly patient. Seeing that someone came to bother her at this time, she was very upset. She didn't look up at the old man in front of her. She waited for him to take out a piece of paper. Then he put his paper on the desk and asked her to check if the prescription was correct. Before she received the paper, the terrible smell from the old man's body made her cough so violently. She covered her nose with one hand, took the paper from the old man with the other, and told him to stay away from her desk a bit. She took the paper, but as soon as she touched it, the coldness of its surface made her want to withdraw her hand. After that, she put the paper on the desk and then waited until the smell from the old man's body was gone before starting to work. She looked at the paper and read each word carefully. It was indeed a prescription, but the patient's name startled her. She read and reread his patient's name. The feeling was so familiar that it surprised her. She tried to remember. Earlier, she had heard many people say that there was a very critical emergency patient in the heart department. He was an old man who had a heart attack. Although the doctors tried to save him, he did not survive. The nurse remembered this detail, and suddenly she felt cold throughout her body. Her hands trembled and lost the feeling. She slowly looked up at the patient who was standing opposite her. The man's face appeared in front of her. She looked closely at this face and screamed in fear. That was exactly the patient who died from a heart attack earlier. His eyes lit up when he looked at her. He moved closer and closer to her. This man slammed his hands on the desk and kept calling her name. His voice echoed throughout the wide hospital hall, which made the nurse almost faint. He kept begging her to check his prescription. Meanwhile, the layers of his skin also began to decompose, peel off, and felt on the desk, which looked very scary. After a while, the old man suddenly stopped talking, but those bright eyes were still staring at the nurse. The nurse at that moment could not control her fear, so she immediately shouted, stood up, and ran away. Hearing the screams, another nurse on shift rushed out from the break room to see what happened. Her colleague just arrived and saw her falteringly pointing forward. Her mouth did not open. There was an elderly patient in front of the desk. She immediately came to intervene. But when she got there, his face scared her. When she looked at him closely, the female colleague realized that it was the pass-away patient that she treated in the emergency room. The horrifying truth made both nurses unable to control their fear, so they shouted at that same time to wake up the whole hospital, which startled everyone. Hearing the loud screams of the nurses, the hospital guards from their rooms also rushed up to check, but when they got there, the story took a different turn. 2 security guards ran after the screams, went to the main hall of the hospital and used flashlights to shine inside. Both of them tried calling loudly, but there was no answer inside. When entering, the security guard saw one female nurse fainted on the ground. No one knew what is the cause of her fainting. The other nurse had a pale face and a blank expression. She was still sitting on a chair and muttering to herself. After saying that she had seen a ghost, she fainted. The 2 security guards didn't understand what was going on. They hurriedly brought 2 nurses to the emergency room to check. After waking up, the female nurse who had sat in the main hall had a problem with her mental health. She was always in a state of panic. She always said that she had met a ghost and asked people around for help, but no one knew what the beginning of the story was. The other female nurse was so shocked about what happened the previous night that she could not keep her life and died the next morning. The body that the doctors were looking for was also found at the bottom of the stairs leading to the morgue. It looked like the body had fallen from above. In the end, these events made the nurse so obsessed that she had to quit her job and undergo psychiatric treatment for a while. She later learned that because of the unfortunate nurse's negligence, the old patient had had a heart attack and died without anyone knowing. This horror story was very popular at the hospital where I worked as an intern for a long time. Today, it is still an obsession with the people on night duty.
This peculiar story tells of a strange charm, and it was the only time that Dr. Chan was unable to cure someone of their ailment. That day, Dr. Chan was drying herbs in his courtyard when a man walked in from the main gate. He looked distraught. He said he had come to see Dr. Chan for a medical examination. The man was dressed neatly. He introduced himself as Liu, who had come from a very distant place, having heard that Dr. Chan's medical skills were excellent. He said he was suffering from a strange illness, and although he had sought help from many places, no one had been able to cure him. Dr. Chan politely invited him inside and said that he had to examine him first to know if he could be helped. Dr. Chan thought the man's face didn't look like he was seriously ill and figured he was probably looking for a kidney tonic to boost his vigor. The man said a strange thing had grown on his chest and asked Dr. Chan to take a look. When asked about his illness, he said something strange had grown on him, then unbuttoned his jacket, revealing his chest for Dr. Chan to see. Dr. Chan was startled. He saw a large ulcer growing in the middle of the man's chest. What was strange was that the ulcer was shaped like a blooming peony flower, only the ulcer looked a bit gruesome. Dr. Chan said the ulcer was called a love charm. Although he had practiced medicine for many years, he had only heard of it and never seen it before. The story Dr. Chan told was not particularly frightening, but it left the listener with a heavy heart. Dr. Chan pondered for a moment and then confirmed that the young man had been cursed, not that he was ill. Seeing Dr. Chan's serious expression, Liu seemed to realize that the thing growing on his body was not simple, and he panicked, asking Dr. Chan about this love charm. Dr. Chan explained that this love charm was also called ghost flower and was a type of curse. Liu cried out in horror, "I've been cursed?" and begged Dr. Chan to save him. Dr. Chan said that to cure it, there were some things he needed to ask him first. Dr. Chan reassured him, saying, "Don't panic. This curse can't be resolved in an instant." Liu desperately pleaded, only wishing Dr. Chan could cure the ulcer immediately. But Dr. Chan was in no hurry to treat him. He calmly told him about the origin of the ghost flower love charm. This ulcer, called ghost flower, was naturally related to flowers. According to legend, this method of cursing originated from the Miao people. Young girls who were about to get married would choose the most beautiful blooming peony flower and water it with their blood every day for 49 days. These peony petals, nourished by the girl's blood, would grow and bloom larger. After that, they would crush the petals into a liquid extract and draw a peony flower on their lover's chest. The crimson liquid would slowly seep into the skin. If the man was unfaithful, an ulcer shaped like a peony flower would grow on his chest. This was the flower curse. If he could receive his lover's forgiveness, and she dripped her blood onto the ulcer, it would heal. If he could not receive his lover's forgiveness, the ulcer would continue to eat deeper, all the way to his heart, and no medicine could save him. Dr. Chan's story about the origin of the ghost flower made Liu so frightened that his body felt soft and weak. After that, he knelt on the ground, desperately begging Dr. Chan to help him. Dr. Chan then asked if he had wronged any girl, which caused her to curse him. Under Dr. Chan's questioning, Liu hesitantly said that when he was in his hometown, he had a childhood sweetheart, and he revealed some secrets. Liu was born in the countryside. Due to his family's difficult financial situation, he did not finish his studies and could only stay home to farm. Although life was a bit tough, he had a childhood sweetheart that others envied. Even though the girl's family opposed their marriage, complaining that Liu's situation was too poor, the girl didn't care about these things. She loved him because he was a good person. The two would always secretly meet by the fields. Over time, their feelings deepened, and they became inseparable. One time, in the heat of passion, the two ate the forbidden fruit. That time, after the two had secretly enjoyed each other in the haystack, Liu fell asleep. When he woke up, he discovered a drawing of a peony flower made of red liquid on his chest and wondered what it was. The girl told him that it was a concentricity charm that her grandmother had taught her to draw, which could protect them and keep them together forever. But things did not go as planned. Because the girl's family felt he had no future and that farming would not earn him money, Liu had no choice but to break up with the girl and go to the city to seek opportunities. The girl tearfully saw him off from the village, not leaving until he disappeared from sight. The city's glamour captivated Liu, and he gradually forgot about the girl waiting for him at home. He began to pursue money and pleasure. In the end, he married a divorced woman simply because she could satisfy all his desires. Liu knelt at Dr. Chan's feet, recounting a part of his past. Dr. Chan, having heard Liu's story, was furious. He was truly an unfaithful man. Dr. Chan truly could not break his love charm and told him that the only way to live was to go and beg that girl for forgiveness. He had to receive the forgiveness and blood of the one who cursed him. As soon as Liu heard that he had to get the forgiveness of the girl he had wronged in order to live, a look of discomfort appeared on his face. Seeing that there was no hope in asking Dr. Chan for help, Liu dejectedly drove away. Dr. Chan said that it was not because Liu was an unfaithful man that he didn't want to save him, but because the ghost flower truly had only that one way to be resolved. Later, as Dr. Chan was traveling to treat patients, he passed by the village Liu had mentioned. Dr. Chan asked the villagers about Liu's news. A villager who knew the story said that Liu had returned to find the girl, but the girl had contracted a serious illness and passed away. Liu did not live much longer either, dying in front of her grave.
I felt lucky. I received the offer to join a well-known advertising firm after an interview. It was also where I experienced something terrifying later. It was the first day of my internship that day. When I arrived at the company, I was directed to the general manager's office, where he greeted me and complimented me on an excellent interview. The GM of this company was really young, handsome, and was known as King of Diamonds. The GM assigned me to the project inventory department, mainly doing some sorting and document editing. After explaining the job, the HR manager came to lead me to my workplace. When we came to the department, he showed me where to work and told me to get to know people around. The table had been cleared, and it seemed that there had been no staff sitting at that position for a long time. Seeing a new colleague, people around started to notice me. At this moment, I felt that everyone's expression was a bit unfriendly. Their attitude didn't seem to be cheerful when I appeared. A female colleague told me that it would be better for me to offer to change the working position. It turned out that the owner of this desk was Lisa, who committed suicide by jumping off the company building. But I didn't care about this matter, because she and I did not know each other. I just felt worried a bit, because I didn't think people would greet me in this way. In the company, I noticed that there was a man sitting next to me who seemed unapproachable. His name was Tom. I found out many times that he was secretly peeking at me, which made me feel so uncomfortable. Also, Tom was usually very shady, and his nasty temper was evident on his face, which made me try to minimize contact with him. A week later, I was called in to work overtime for drafting bidding paperwork for a new corporate project. I was the last one remaining in this vast, desolate office. This was my first project. Succeed or failure of this project would determine whether the firm would keep me. Fortunately, all of the supplies had been pre-prepared, so it wasn't too tough for me. I took a sip of coffee and sat back in my chair, seeing that the bidding paperwork was nearly finished. I went by the windows, wanted to enjoy the night scenery outside and rest my tired eyes. A breeze of cold air rushed in as soon as the windows opened, making me feel quite calm. But then, a dark shadow appeared in front of me, falling down at a breakneck pace. Even though it was just for a split second, that figure passed me and dropped below. I instantly pushed my head out and glanced down. I was terrified, but there was nothing odd down there. My heart was still racing. I could tell that I saw someone falling from the building just now. Then I returned to my seat and deliberately placed my palm on my forehead. I was reclining back in my chair. All out of a sudden, the office lights went out. My computer screen went black at the same time. I instantly leaped out of my chair, knowing that the bidding paperwork I had been working on earlier had not been saved, and that if the computer crashed, the entire night's effort would be gone. So I checked from the top to the bottom, and this time it was really gone. The power in this building had been turned off. Suddenly the screen just switched on. Even worse, a video began auto-playing on the screen. This video scenario seemed quite familiar. Wasn't this my office? The video feed was zoomed in and finally mirrored on a desk. This desk resembled mine. But the woman at the table wasn't me. She was a total stranger who was typing in front of the computer and appeared to be working hard and concentrated. But then two arms appeared from behind her, covering her lips and pulling her back. According to this force, the woman was taken aback and leaned back. Then she fell down on the floor. The woman's legs were continually straining in the next shot. After a few minutes, the woman was able to release herself. She bolted in the direction of the camera, her clothing strewn, and in a panic. At that moment, the video screen was jammed. The camera frame went back and showed the top floor of the office building, where the woman was being pushed towards the rooftop railing by someone. Her expression was filled with terror, and she implored the guy. However, the person who was tormenting her was still unable to be seen clearly. That man approached cautiously, but she gave up and leaped down below at that point. The man or person didn't appear to anticipate the woman to be so rash. He went over after the woman jumped down and peered down below. At this point, the man's face emerged clearly in the camera. It was the general manager, and I couldn't believe my eyes. The murderer in the video was really him. What was more unexpected was his remarkable serene look. The screen then returned to its previous state of noise, but the computer let out a horrible wail. I jumped out of the chair, startled and now in panic. But what was even worse was that when I glanced up, there was already a person seated on my chair. She was the woman in the video right now. The woman's eyes were transfixed to the computer screen, tears as crimson as blood streaming down her face, her body and clothing stained in blood. Too terrified, I ran to the door with all my strength. However, when I arrived at the entrance, I was unable to open the office's glass door. The wail behind was becoming louder, piercing my heart, and I was sweating profusely. My legs were mushy, and as I clutched the glass door handle, my entire body trembled. A person arrived outside the door in the middle of my anguish. It was Tom, but he didn't gaze at me. Tears in his eyes instead. He was staring straight into the office. The odd thing was that when Tom yanked on the door handle, the glass door instantly opened as if it had never been locked. A breeze blasted out of the room at the moment Tom opened the door. Both Tom and I stared at the desk at the same moment. The woman had left, the chair was vacant, and the drapes were only faintly swaying. Tom eventually returned to face me at this moment and said, "What happened? Wasn't Lisa just here?" When he said that he had just seen Lisa, I informed him that it was true that I had just met Lisa. "She also showed me a video on my computer of her leaping from the building and the CEO murdering her," I added. When Tom heard this, he dashed over to my computer. That a video was saved on my computer desktop, and the video substance was identical to what I just viewed, which shocked Tom. The next day, using the video as proof, the company's GM was arrested. He was accused of causing Lisa's death after being sexually harassed by him. Later, I discovered that Lisa was Tom's lover, despite the fact that they had only known each other for a month. Tom seemed to have lost his enthusiasm in work and life after discovering that Lisa committed suicide. That night I met Lisa. Tom was depressed. He was smoking in front of the company. When he noticed the office lights were turned off and a scream was heard, he took it as a terrible omen and raced up to see what was going on. The cops were baffled as to who made the video. However, there was no evidence of editing in the video material, leaving the general manager unable to resist when questioned and forced to lower his head to admit. This heartbreaking story took place in a small city in the north. The pitiful but also blameworthy person in this story was a boy named Beto. The boy's mother died early in an accident, so he lived with his father. At first, the father and son's life was very peaceful and happy, but a year later, his father married a new wife and his life also started to be sad from that point on. Since his stepmother moved in together, Beto was beaten and scolded by his father, even though his father had never done it before. On the contrary, Beto's father always loved his new wife very much. Sometimes later, Beto learned that his stepmother was pregnant. The quarrels between him and his father became more and more intense. In the eyes of Beto's father now, he was a rebellious and stubborn boy who was disruptive. In Beto's heart, there was only one mother. He did not accept and allow the stepmother to take the place of his mother. Time flew. The stepmother's belly was getting bigger and bigger. One day, after his father and stepmother went shopping together for the baby, they also bought Beto a clothed doll. Beto saw the gift, but he did not feel happy. On the contrary, he became angrier because he thought his stepmother was deliberately humiliating him, assuming that he had the same hobbies as girls. Afraid of affecting the fetus and affecting his wife, Beto's father silently threatened to force him to learn to be obedient if Beto did not want his pocket money to be cut. Because Beto didn't want to be with his stepmother, he made excuses to eat outside every day. Without pocket money, he wouldn't be able to live. Beto reluctantly accepted the doll and sadly went back to his room. He couldn't hide his anger, so he slammed the door in front of his father and stepmother. Outside, the father and stepmother were also tired of Beto's ignorant and disrespectful behavior. After entering the room, Beto directly threw the doll on the ground and cried silently on the bed. At this time, he felt very lonely and sad. Beto cried out alone for an hour and fell asleep because he was tired. The following morning, when Beto woke up, he saw the doll sitting on the ground. The more he looked at it, the more sulky Beto felt. He angrily picked up the doll and was about to throw it out. As soon as he went to the door, Beto saw his stepmother going somewhere. The hatred in the boy's heart began to rise. Beto suddenly had an idea and threw the doll towards his stepmother. He immediately called his stepmother and asked her to help pick up the doll. The stepmother turned her head when she heard Beto's voice and couldn't help but be surprised to see that the doll she gave Beto yesterday was lying at her feet. Seeing that his stepmother didn't say anything nor react, Beto pretended to care about his stepmother and said he would pick it up himself. Seeing that, the stepmother thought that Beto had accepted her, so she was happy and wanted to pick up the doll for him. After saying that, she slowly bent down to pick up the doll. Beto also took the opportunity to sneak around behind his stepmother's back. Then Beto quickly pushed the stepmother's back with his hand. Due to loss of balance, the stepmother fell forward. Because her belly was too big, it hit the ground hard. The stepmother began to feel severe abdominal pain, then fainted from loss of blood. At this point, under her body was all blood, and the baby in her belly was dead. The blood flowed out in a stream and stuck to the doll next to it. Beto looked at his stepmother lying on the ground, a satisfied smile on the corner of his mouth. At that time, the boy felt happy that no one could take his father anymore. Beto hurriedly picked up the doll and hurriedly left. Then he threw the doll in the corner of the room where no one else could find it. Next, he pretended to be the first person to spot the injured person and called for an ambulance. After taking the stepmother to the hospital, Beto became a hero. Because the doctors all said that if it came a little later, the mother's life could not be saved. Although the fetus died, Beto's stepmother was fine. Beto's father immediately wanted to buy some food to nourish his wife. He also told Beto to take care of his stepmother. Beto's father didn't wait for him to answer, then hurriedly left, leaving Beto alone in the emergency room. Beto looked at the shadow of his father was far away. Suddenly, he felt extremely scared. He was worried that if his stepmother woke up, the truth would be surely exposed. Beto went inside and took a sneak peek. and this time the stepmother woke up and couldn't help but mourn for the dead baby. Beto saw the fruit knife next to him. He suddenly had a desire to kill because he was afraid that his father would kill him if he knew everything. Without thinking too much, Beto made up his mind. He took the fruit knife and went to his stepmother's bed. When she heard footsteps, the stepmother looked up and broke down in tears when she saw Beto holding the knife. Beto walked to the bed, only called his stepmother's name once, and suddenly smiled a ghostly smile. That smile scared the stepmother. She knew the one pushing her was Beto. She didn't expect Beto to be so scary. In the situation, Beto was also extremely worried and hesitant about whether to stab his stepmother to death or not. Although she hated Beto very much, the child in her stomach was also lost. The stepmother said she did not intend to denounce Beto and promised to tell everyone she accidentally fell. Just when Beto hesitated and his stepmother was scared, his father suddenly shouted from behind. Beto turned his head in surprise, knowing that he had been discovered. Beto pretended to say that he just wanted to peel apples for his stepmother to eat. However, Beto's father could not believe his explanation because there were no fruits in the room. The father ordered Beto to give him the knife immediately. Holding the knife behind him, Beto tried to cut his hand with the knife. Seeing the blood dripping, Beto's stepmother understood what he meant. She did not want to break the relationship between father and son, so she explained that she wanted to eat apples but later realized there were no apples in the room. Beto's father immediately believed his wife and said nothing more, gently telling Beto to return home first. Beto rushed home because he didn't dare and didn't want to stay in the hospital anymore. After Beto left, the stepmother hugged Beto's father to relieve the pain in her heart. She also did not tell Beto's crimes to his father. At home, Beto also felt tormented and scared. He was afraid of his stepmother telling the truth and afraid of being sent to a reformatory for criminal children. But after that, everything was fine. A month later, Beto's stepmother was discharged from the hospital, but they did not return home. Later, Beto learned that his father and stepmother had bought another house and started a new life without him. Beto's father would transfer money to him once a month. All Beto's living expenses were covered by his father. When he saw his father leave, Beto was heartbroken. Now Beto felt that the world no longer loved him. Over time, Beto began to live alone. One day, after returning from school, Beto saw the doll he had thrown away lying at the door. The doll still had blood on it, and Beto immediately thought that maybe it was his stepmother who brought it to scare him. Beto didn't even look at the doll. He kicked it away and went into the house. Late at night, when Beto went to sleep, he had a strange dream. In the dream, Beto was chased by a child. The child kept asking Beto to play with him, making Beto extremely scared. Although he could not see the child talking, Beto could completely hear its voice coming from his brain. Chased by the child, Beto risked his life to run forward despite the endless space ahead. While Beto was deep asleep, the doll he kicked in the afternoon suddenly entered the room and stood staring at him in the dark. The doll then jumped onto Beto's face, covering his nose, mouth, and using its weight, causing him to suffocate. 2 days later, Beto's father tried to call home several times, but he didn't receive a reply. His father decided to go back home to check it out, and he found out Beto was dead. Beto's eyes, nose, and mouth were all covered with cotton wool. Beto's corpse was so scary that it haunted his father for a long time. Beto's father called the police soon after, and after the police investigated, they did not find any trace of the perpetrator. Therefore, the case was still unfinished. Everyone then focused on Beto's corpse. But no one noticed that in the corner of the room there was an abandoned doll. It showed a very strange smile. It had a face like a baby and was crying silently. No one knew that inside the doll lived another world, and Beto's soul had been trapped there. Time later, Beto's death still torments Beto's father and stepmother. They only blame themselves for the carelessness that caused the death of their poor son.